In the previous lecture we were discussing about the solution of algebraic equations using elimination methods and some of their important features. Before going into the next topic, we will like to work out one example related to what we have discussed in the previous lecture. So, the example is like this: you are given a coefficient matrix A find the condition number of A. So, if you recall, for the condition number of A we require the norm of A and norm of A inverse. So, we need to calculate what is A inverse. So, if you have A as a collection of 4 numbers, this matrix, then what is A inverse? Adjoint of A by the determinant of A. So, for adjoint of A, what you do? First you find out the cofactors corresponding to each. So, that let us do that separately. So, for the first term the cofactor is minus d. So, it is minus 1 to the power I plus j. So, minus 1 to the power, okay. So, only d, right, minus 1 to the power 1 plus 1. So, only d. Then for the next one minus c, then the third one minus b, and the fourth one A. Now, what we do? We find out the transpose of these. So, we interchange the rows and the columns. So, we have this as d minus b minus c A by the determinant of A. Okay. So, here what is given? A is 2, B is 1, C is 2 and D is 1.01. So, A inverse is equal to 1.01, then minus 1, then minus 2, then 2 divided by the determinant of A, that is 0.02. So, if you calculate these terms, this will become 50.05, then minus 50, then minus 100 and 100. So, for finding out the condition number you can calculate different types of norms, but one can use the infinity norm as one of the standard reference norms that people commonly use. So, the infinity norm for A, what is that? Infinity norm is maximum row sum norm. So, out of the two rows, which row gives the maximum sum of the magnitude of the individual numbers? So, the second row, that is 3.01. Infinity norm for A inverse, Here also the second row gives the maximum, it is 100 plus 100, that is 200. So the condition number, if you evaluate in terms of the infinity norm, this is 602. So this is quite large, which means that it is an ill conditioned system. You can figure out the source of this largeness. The source of this largeness is the smallness of the determinant, because it is divided by the determinant, because the determinant is small, A inverse is blown up and therefore its norms are blown up. So smaller the determinant, there is a greater vulnerability of the matrix of becoming more ill conditioned. That is one of the important inferences that we can draw from this particular example. Next we will move on to the iteration methods.
Sir, in the last class you proved that conditionality is always greater than or equal to 1.
Yes.
And for what value of
So the condition number, what you are saying is that what is the condition number which we can call large? The condition number that we have as the minimum is 1. So if you now see that what you can call as large, it is about 2 orders of magnitude higher than the smallest one that you can consider as large. So of course you can have any possible limit as your large number, because the determinant of the matrix can go very close to 0 and therefore 1 by that can become a very large number, but at least 1 or 2 or at least 1 order of magnitude higher sometimes is still okay, 2 orders of magnitude higher is considered to be a large one. So this typically the number that we encountered with, that is typically a large number. Now next we will go on to the iteration methods. So iteration methods, what is the basic philosophy of the iteration methods? That you start with an initial guess for the solution and iterate on it till you get a final solution which is a converging solution. So you expect that the final solution will converge. We will see whether the method itself guarantees whether the final solution will converge or there are certain conditions that need to be fulfilled. So we will go into that subsequently, but let us try to understand the iteration methods through some examples. Let us say that you have the system of equations let us say we have these two equations. So what we will do is we will write an explicit formula for x1 from equation 1. So x1 is 6 minus x2 by 5 and we will write an explicit formula for x2 from equation 2. So x2 will be 6 minus x1 by 5. Now to begin with you do not know what is x1 or what is x2. So let us say that you make an initial guess some initial guess, say x1 0 equal to 0 and x2 0 equal to 0. So the superscript indicates the level of iteration. 0 means that is the initial guess. Now you try to update on this initial guess. So what you do? You make some iterative formula based on these equations that you have got from your given system. So let us say that you have x1 k or k plus 1 is equal to 6 minus x2 k by 5, and x2 k plus 1 is equal to 6 minus x1 k by 5. If we write the corresponding formula in this way, then this is known as Jacobi's iteration scheme or Jacobi's method. So let us find out what is x1 1. So x1 1 is 6 minus x2 0 by 5. So 6 by 5, x2 0 is 0. Then x2 1 is 6 minus x1 0 by 5. So that is 6 by 5. So that is step 1. Then step 2, x1 2 is equal to 6 minus x2 1 by 5. So 6 minus 6 by 5 by 5. (24 by 25). x2 2 is 6 minus x1 1 by 5. So 6 minus 6 by 5 by 5, that is 24 by 25. In this way, if you do a few steps, you will see that x1 and x2 they are converging to 1 and 1. And when you declare convergence, you declare convergence when the result between the difference in results between the previous step and the present step does not vary substantially. Now what is that substantial? It all depends on the precision that you expect. So if you give a 3 decimal accuracy, 4 decimal accuracy, 5 decimal accuracy, 10 decimal, whatever is the number of decimal accuracy that you yourself specify, if you find that the difference in successive iterations falls within that tolerance, then you accept that as a converged solution. Now what we see in the Jacobi's method is something very interesting, and which is perhaps one of the issues that tends to slow down the method a bit. So when you are calculating x1 k plus 1, you can use x2 k. When you are calculating x2 k plus 1, x1 k plus 1 is already available to you, but you are still using x1 k. You have the opportunity of using that updated x1 which has been calculated just in the previous step. So if you do that, you may have your solution having the information of the more updated iterated value than what was possible if you had used a older value. So if you want to update your iterations at a more fast rate, then you may replace this with x1 k plus 1 instead of x1 k, because x1 k plus 1 is already available. So, if you make this modification to the Jacobi's method, then that is known as Gauss-Seidel method. So, let us try to use the Gauss-Seidel method for this particular example and see that what is the difference that we get. So, x1 1 is equal to 6 minus x2 0 by 5, that is 6 by 5. x2 1, now you are using 6 minus x1 1 by 5. So, 6 minus 6 by 5 by 5. So, this is 24 by 25. You can see that what you have got in one more step here, you have already now got it one step before. So, next you calculate one more step just for example. So, x1 2 is equal to 6 minus x2 1 by 5. So, 6 minus 24 by 25 by 5. So, that is 126 by 125, and x 2 2 is equal to 6 minus x 1 2 by 5. So, 6 minus 126 by 125 by 5. Whatever, it will be a number close to 1. What, 624 by? So, you can see that the numbers in the subsequent steps are going faster close to 1, which is the correct solution. Here also the numbers are converging to 1, but at a much slower rate. Here within 2 steps it is converging much more rapidly towards the solution. So, no matter whether you are using the Jacobi's method or the Gauss-Seidel method, you have a hope that you will converge to the solution, and if it does so, the Gauss-Seidel will do it in a faster way. Now, we have to understand that we have just a hope, because we have not derived this formula from a very rigorous consideration. So, at this stage we have just a hope that it will converge to the correct solution, but where is the guarantee that it will finally converge to the correct solution? There is no guarantee as such, and we have to establish that what can be the condition which should dictate whether it is expected to converge or not. So, we will try to have a generalized analysis of the Jacobi's method and the Gauss-Seidel method. So, generalized analysis of the iterative methods. Let us say that we have the system of equations a11 x1 plus a12 x2 plus a13 x3 in this way up to a1n xn is equal to b1. Then A21 x1 plus A22 x2 plus A23 x3 in this way plus A2n xn is equal to B2. An1 x1 plus An2 x2 plus An3 x3 plus Ann xn is equal to Bn. So, let us try to write this particular expression in the matrix form Ax equal to B. To do that, we keep in mind the following iterative formula. So, x1 k plus 1 is equal to B1 minus A12 x2 k minus A13 x3 k in this way A1n xn k divided by A11. So, you can see that in the formula the diagonal element A11 gets multiplied with the variable that you are interested to solve, and the off diagonal terms are distributed in a certain way. So, in the first step all the off diagonal terms they are there together. Next step, the next step will differ based on whether it is Jacobi's method or Gauss-Seidel method. So, let us write the next step by considering one example Jacobi, another example Gauss-Seidel. So, Jacobi's method, x2 k plus 1 is equal to B2 minus A21 x1 minus then plus A23 x3 then in this way plus A2n xn all with k. Divided by A22, whereas in the Gauss-Seidel it is x2 k plus 1 is equal to B2 minus A21 x1 k plus 1 and the remaining are with k. So, A23 x3 in this way A2n xn k by A22. Now, the question is that can we write the Jacobi and the Gauss-Seidel formula in a generic universal way. So, if you see you can have 3 different types of terms in the most general case in the numerator. One is the right hand side, then the term on one side of the diagonal in the second row, A21 is on one side of the diagonal and A23 A24, these are in the other side of the diagonal, and the diagonal term comes in the denominator. So, if you multiply the diagonal with the variable and take all the terms in one side together, then as if you have now decomposed A as a summation of 3 different matrices L plus D plus U, where L is a lower triangular matrix, D is a diagonal matrix, and U is an upper triangular matrix. Do not confuse it with LU factorization, it is simply addition of 3 different matrices so that the final result is the matrix A. So, what are the contents of L? So, L will have only the lower diagonal terms. So, A21, then A31, A32, then AN1, AN2 in this way, AN n minus 1. This is L. What is D? D is A11, A22, ANN. On it is just a diagonal matrix and zeros on both sides of the diagonal. And what is U? A12, A13 in this way, A1n, then A23 in this way, A2n, and so on. So, if you add L, D and U, you will get the coefficient matrix A. So, let us try to identify that where do we get this L, D and U in the iteration formula. So, where do we get D? It is straightforward. Here in the denominator what is appearing, that is the contribution from D. In the numerator you can see in the Jacobi's formula you have A21, A23 all these. So, this is what? So, you have A21 corresponding to lower, A23 these are corresponding to upper. So, you have the lower corresponding to xk and upper also corresponding to xk. In the Gauss-Seidel formula you have the lower triangular matrix corresponding to xk plus 1 and the upper triangular matrix corresponding to xk. So, let us write the formula in a more abridged manner. So, in place of Ax equal to B, we will write L plus D plus U x equal to B. In the Jacobi's method, you have D x k plus 1, D will go with x k plus 1 and L plus U will go with x k. Is equal to B. So, x k plus 1 is equal to minus D inverse L plus U x k plus D inverse B. Okay. Remember that the superscripts are the iteration stages. So, these are not powers, just iteration stages. So, this in a short form you can write x k plus 1 is equal to m x k plus c, where m is equal to minus d inverse L plus u and c is equal to d inverse b. Let us now try to do it for the Gauss Seidel. In the Gauss Seidel, D was with x k plus 1, L was also with x k plus 1 and U was with x k. So, d x k plus 1 is equal to minus L, sorry, d plus L x k plus 1 or L plus d, whatever, L plus d x k plus 1 is equal to minus u x k plus b. This means x k plus 1 is equal to minus L plus d inverse u x k plus L plus d inverse b. So, x k plus 1 is equal to m x k plus c also corresponds to the form of the Gauss Seidel iteration scheme, where m is minus L plus d inverse u and c is L plus d inverse b. So, why we have done this unification is that now if we want to make an analysis of these methods, then we can make an analysis using the generic form x k plus 1 equal to m x k plus c, where the matrix M just differs from one method to the other, but the generic form remains unaltered. So, what we will do is we will try to make an analysis of these methods accordingly. So, x k plus 1 is equal to m x k plus c Now, let us say that x star is the actual solution. So, x star is equal to m x star plus c. So, actual solution should satisfy the iteration where there is no change in the value of the variable with new iteration, that is when it has converged. So, x k plus 1 and x k both will be x star. So, if you subtract these two, then x minus x star is equal to m x k minus x star. This is x k plus 1. So, this is the error in the k plus 1th step. So, E k plus 1. this is equal to m Ek, where E represents the difference between x at a particular iteration level and the actual solution x. So, from this we can write certain important points. One point is, we can first write E1 is equal to m E0. So, E2 is m E1, that is equal to m square E0. In this way, if you come down, Ek is equal to m to the power k E0. Sorry, yes, Ek is equal to m to the power k E0. E2 is m to the power 2 E0, so Ek is m to the power k E0. So, when do you expect the solution to converge? You expect the solution to converge when in the subsequent steps the error goes down. So, you must have error in the kth step, possibly the norm of that, because this is error is a vector, divided by the error in the 0th step, that is to begin with. This ratio must be less than 1. At least if that is not the case, then your error is getting magnified. Whatever was the error because of initial guess, that gets magnified with iterations, then it is diverging. So, this is the requirement for convergence. So, that will require that the norm of m to the power k must be less than 1. Now, it is very difficult to use that as a method of assessment. Why? Because it is not a very computationally inexpensive mechanism to calculate the power of a matrix. So, first of all you have to determine the matrix M. Remember, M is not the coefficient matrix A, it is derived from the coefficient matrix, it involves some L, D, U, all this. So, M requires some matrix inversion in certain cases. So, you can see, for example, if you want to calculate M for the Gauss-Seidel method, you require L plus D inverse. So, matrix inversion itself is computationally expensive. So, from that you find M, find out that to the power k. So, to have an estimate of whether it will converge or not, the kind of steps that you need to go through is more than what it deserves for. So, the objective now will be to keep this particular inference or conclusion in mind, but based on that try to achieve some more simple way of assessing the possibility of convergence, and that we will try to do in the subsequent steps. Now, we know that power of a matrix may be equivalently expressed in terms of scalars by using the eigenvalues and eigenvectors, and that is what we will try to exploit here. So, what we will consider that let lambda i's be eigenvalues of M and Vi's be the corresponding eigenvectors. Okay. Now let us form the vector E0 as a linear combination of the eigenvectors corresponding to M. So we can form this as A0 or maybe we use start from subscript 1. So A1 V1 plus A2 V2 plus in this way AN Vn. So we make E0 as a linear combination of the eigenvectors of the matrix M. We can make it in this way by using the coefficients A1, A2 up to AN judiciously. So these are according to our particular choice, so that we can write it in this way. While writing it in this way, we are keeping one thing in mind, that the eigenvalues are arranged in a way that mod of lambda 1 greater than mod of lambda 2 greater than mod of lambda 3 greater than mod of lambda n. So lambda 1 is the eigenvalue with the maximum magnitude. Out of all possible eigenvalues, lambda 1 is the maximum. So we are arranging the eigenvalues in the descending order of magnitude. Now M E0 is equal to A1. So we are interested to calculate M to the power k E0, because that is Ek. So M E0 is A1 M V1 plus A2 M V2 in this way plus An M Vn. So now because M is an eigenvalue lambda 1 is an eigenvalue of M and V1 is the corresponding eigenvector, we can write M V1 is equal to lambda 1 V1, because lambda is the eigenvalue and V is the corresponding eigenvector of M. So in place of M V1 we will write lambda 1 V1, in place of M V2 we will write lambda 2 V2, in place of M Vn we will write lambda n Vn. The next step, that into M, so M square E0 is equal to A1 lambda 1 M V1 plus A2 lambda 2 M V2, in this way An lambda n M Vn. Again in place of M V1 we can write lambda 1 V1, in place of M V2 lambda 2 V2 M Vn lambda n Vn. So this becomes A1 lambda 1 square V1 plus A2 lambda 2 square V2, in this way plus An lambda n square Vn. Proceeding in this way, M to the power k E0 is equal to A1 lambda 1 to the power k V1 plus A2 lambda 2 to the power k V2, in this way plus An lambda n to the power k Vn. Now if we compare M to the power k E0 with E0, as if we are dividing this entire expression with E0 in terms of the norm, of course. So, when we make such a division by taking the norms, then what will be the dominant terms? See, lambda 1 is the maximum eigenvalue and you are making it to the power k where k is large. So, the first term will be the leading order or the dominant term. And that you can compare with the leading order term or the dominant term of E0. If you do that, you will see that what you require for convergence is that mod of lambda 1 to the power k, that is less than 1. So, this is Ek. So, this is nothing but an estimate of norm of Ek by norm of E0. So, in other words, that means what you require is norm of lambda, mod of lambda max, that is less than 1. There are certain important things that need to be noted in this context. First of all, this lambda is called as spectral radius or lambda max mod of that, it is called as spectral radius of convergence. When we say spectral, it implicates a distribution of frequencies, and why it is given such a name is possibly because of the fact that in many physical problems eigenvalues represent natural frequencies of the system. So, it has in certain physical problems it has something to do with the frequencies, but in general what does this implicate? It implicates that whatever are the eigenvalues of the matrix M, the maximum of that should be less than 1. So, if you are considering to draw a circle with the center at origin and the radius as the magnitude of different eigenvalues, you can draw different circles, and the maximum radius of all these possible circles should be less than 1, because this lambda max mod of that must be less than 1 for convergence. The second important thing is that it is a sufficient condition for convergence. But it is not a necessary condition for convergence, we have to remember this. So, there is a distinction between necessary and sufficient condition. So, if you say that something is a necessary condition for convergence, what does it mean? It means that without satisfying that condition never there will be convergence. But if you say something is sufficient condition for convergence, what do you mean? You mean that if that condition is satisfied, you will definitely have convergence, but you may also have convergence without satisfying that condition. Now, in iterative methods there are many ways in which you can achieve convergence without satisfying any consideration. For example, say you are so lucky that your initial guess is the actual solution. So maybe from some source by some intuition or whatever you have guessed the correct solution. So in the iterative method what you do, you substitute your guess in the equation and see whether it is satisfied or not in a systematic way. So if you have the guess as the actual solution and put that in the solution, obviously put that in the equation, obviously equation will be satisfied. So in one step you will get convergence without going through all these rigors. So that means you can, at least we have identified one limiting case in which you can have convergence without bothering for these types of conditions or constraints. So that is why we say that it is a sufficient condition. So we have to be very careful about using these terms necessary and sufficient condition for convergence. Let us maybe take one simple example, common life example to understand this. So let us say that, let us make a statement that somebody, if he or she wants to become a very famous singer, should be very strong in classical music. So if we say that this is a sufficient condition, it can be accepted, that if somebody is very good in classical music, definitely he or she will be a very good singer maybe. On the other hand, if we say that it is a necessary condition for becoming a very well established singer, that is not true. A well known example is Kishore Kumar. So what we can say is that you can still become a very prolific singer without going through the roots of the classical music. So that is not a necessary condition, but having a very strong base in classical music may be a sufficient condition. Okay. So we have to be very careful and particular about the terminology here, use of the terminology sufficient condition for convergence but not necessary condition for convergence. The next terminology that we will try to understand now is called as the rate of convergence. So the rate of convergence talks about the following. If we know that it is converging, the next question will come that at what rate it is converging, or in other words how many iterations that may be necessary to achieve the convergence, minimum how many number of iterations that may be necessary. So let us say that we require a m decimal accuracy. Then what we can say? Then we can say that in terms of order of magnitude, this is less than 10 to the power minus m. This mod of lambda max, which we call as spectral radius of convergence, this we give a name rho. So we say that this means that this is essentially mod of lambda max to the power k. So rho to the power k less than 10 to the power minus m, where rho is nothing but mod of lambda max, that is the spectral radius of convergence, we give it a name rho. So if we take the log of both sides with respect to the base 10, then k log 10 with base rho is less than minus m. So, we have m greater than k log 10 1 by rho, sorry, less than, right. So, what we have done, so we have brought m on this side and this on this side, just check whether this is alright. Then k greater than m by log 10 1 by rho. So, this log 1 by rho with respect to base 10, this we call as R or rate of convergence. Why we call this as rate of convergence? We call this as a rate of convergence because you can see k is the number of steps necessary. So, more is the rate of convergence, less is the number of steps that becomes necessary to achieve the convergence. Okay. So, we will stop here today, we will take it up from here in the next class and illustrate this through an example. Thank you.